Hello everyone, and welcome to the City of Burlington Mayor's Show here on CCTV. I'm Mayor Emma Mulvaney-Stanek. I'm excited to do my second show since being mayor, and tonight we're going to talk to who work for the City of Burlington. First, Ashley Parker from our Clerk Treasurer's Office, who runs our Capitals program, and then our Department of Public Works Director, Chapin Spencer. Both have worked for the city for quite a while, and I'll let them introduce themselves in just a moment. So tonight's show, we'll be talking on two aspects of sort of a larger effort we'll be bringing to the city on January 6th. I'll mention this a couple times in the show today. January 6th will be a town hall style meeting at City Hall, most likely at 5:30. And we're going to go into all of the money related questions that we'll be bringing to the City Council later in January for their final approval. It's in a great and an important place for some basic information, for us to kind of break down in plain language why we are putting questions to voters, and for you to learn a little bit more about your city of Burlington. And so January 6th, 5:30 is a great place to come and learn some information, and we'll talk about two parts of that tonight. So we're going to talk about our capital needs related to our water department, so often also called the water division of DPW, as well as our needs for our capital side of our infrastructure as a city, which is often called the general obligation for bonding purposes. So with that, let me introduce my guests. So again, second time on running the show. So first, Ashley, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mayor. I am Ashley Parker. I am the city's capital program director. I've been with the city for just under 3 years, 2.5. And yeah, I really love working in this role, planning the capital budget for the city.
Great, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
And Chapin?
Great. It's a pleasure to be here, Mayor. And Chapin Spencer, Director of Public Works. Hard to imagine it's been 11 years in this role. I think one of the neat things here is that all three of us are Burlington residents. Mm-hmm. And I think we uniquely understand that not only are we recommending this generational improvement of our infrastructure, but as residents, this does have a cost. And that we all need to understand what that cost is as we evaluate the cost benefit of these investments.
Great. Well, again, thank you both for being here. You're my second official show guest, so I'm still
happy to be here,
figuring it all out. And also, as you said, Chapin, we actually live in 3 different parts of the city: the South End, Old North End, and New North End. Between the 3 of us, and
that's right.
The reason why I raise that is that it's an interesting way we've been looking at the capital needs of the city and really talking about citywide what we really need as throughout all the neighborhoods, and where perhaps I know in the Old North End where I live, for example, there's often been conversations around feeling less included in investments and whatnot. And really, as we try to queue up this conversation, I want folks who are watching or watching a recording or watching this live to know we're trying to be very intentional about how we spend these funds and how we start to queue up more ways people can be participating and how we prioritize where we're spending money, more money, less money, etc. So we want the whole city to really feel the investments that we make as collectively as taxpayers. So Ashley, I'm wondering if you could just queue up sort of like kind of maybe the couple. First of all, what is the piece of the puzzle, if you will, that is the general obligation bond, and how does the whole capital program in general work? And then maybe from there, take us a little bit into, well, let's just start there, because most people, including me, didn't fully understand our capital program and how it works across all the city departments.
Yeah, no, it's a really, really great question. So the city's capital program, general fund capital program, I'll say, is really focused on our capital infrastructure asset needs across DPW, streets, sidewalks, fleet, our transportation infrastructure, and also facilities and parks, and even our innovations in the technology group and the public art folks. It really covers a whole assortment. It does not include our special revenues, which is the other half of the conversation tonight. So I think that's one of the big differences is we have a very different budget to address all of our other general fund infrastructure needs. Mm-hmm.
So in how we structure our budget, the general fund is really what funds most of our departments, but not all. And then these special funds are sort of the revenue generating on their own, like the water division and also Burlington Electric Department and the airport. They generate, so they are separate departments and separate funding sources. So when Ashley's talking around these capital infrastructure needs for the city, it's going to support a lot of the general fund side of the ledger, if you will.
Yeah.
And one thing that I also didn't really really realize is how we currently structure what money we have available right now in the city. So right now, if we were not to do anything different, what is our general budget that we have year after year for doing anything that's outside of the normal operating expenses of a fire department or the operating expenses of City Hall even? Like, what do we have as a full city right now at our disposal?
So on the capital improvement side, we have a $2 million budget. Annually, per city charter, we have the ability to go out and borrow for $2 million. And that's it. And these general obligation bonds, the $20 million that we're talking about today, is a really important piece of our revenue to be able to supplement all of the needs of our general fund capital program. We do have some smaller pieces that come into the capital program. For example, there are what we call dedicated taxes, which comes through for very specific purposes, like we have penny for parks. On the DPW side, we have our street capital tax that helps fund the maintenance of our streets and sidewalks, for example. But the capital budget, for a truly sustainable capital budget, we really need to do more to bring in additional revenues that will help us be able to do really keep up the city infrastructure so that we can all have a city to walk around and enjoy. So.
And we'll come back to some more of the details because, again, it's called a GEO bond or a GO bond in other cities. I want to bring back the GO bond. It sounds a little bit more exciting because it's like, let's go, let's get some infrastructure investments into our city, especially at a critical time where we know a lot of stuff is perhaps not where we need it. But let's switch gears a little bit and just introduce the other bond question that we're working on to bring to voters. And you might have seen this at a MPA near you recently, or if you watch city council meetings, you might have seen a few presentations by Department of Public Works. So first, can you cue up a little bit of what is the water division and how does that function in terms of that element of our infrastructure as a city?
Great, thanks, Mayor. DPW has 4 divisions, one of which is water resources, which covers wastewater, stormwater, and drinking water. And these are 3 utilities that their operation is funded by you as a ratepayer, different than the general operations of the city, which are paid through property taxes. So the utilities have a whole range of infrastructure similar to the general fund. And similarly as well, there's infrastructure that has not been updated in decades. And infrastructure that doesn't routinely get updated is more liable to break when it's beyond its useful life. We have unplanned outages. They can be more challenging for our dedicated staff to maintain. And we collectively want to be more proactive in making sure that the infrastructure is safe, it's resilient, and it also can plan for our future growth. And I know, Mayor, one of your priorities, as well as much of the community, is around housing. Mm-hmm. And for us on the wastewater side, to be able to accommodate that housing, we need specific investments to get there. Mm-hmm. So there are 2 proposed bond requests from the Water Division of DPW. One is a lake bond, which is predominantly focused on our wastewater plants. There are 3 in Burlington, and you get extra credit for knowing that one is on the waterfront, one's on Riverside Avenue, and one in the far New North End. And then there is a water bond that is around $21 million focused on upgrades to our water distribution system and our reservoir. Mm-hmm. So those 2, and the wastewater bond does also include some stormwater upgrades as well. So these 2 bonds would complement the general obligation bond that focuses on the city's general fund infrastructure by focusing on the utility infrastructure. Mm-hmm.
Great. And a little bit of Bond 101, because they are both bonds, but they are, as Chapin was sort of alluding to, they have similar processes for which they go through our democratic process, but they are actually ultimately paid for differently within how they are structured. So I want to make sure voters know that there's at minimum 3 major steps that every bond goes through in terms of getting to to the point where we would actually go out for that bond with a financial institution. So the first step is that we articulate the need as the administration, which is the mayor, and in partnership with our department, or in this case, the capital program, which oversees a lot of different departments' infrastructure needs. We make a case, we do a lot of assessment, we do a lot of vetting. Ashley has a very scary spreadsheet that has a lot of the needs because we itemize and inventory what our ultimate needs are, so we can have a real tangible understanding of what is critical infrastructure that's failing. She has that in red, no shocker, on that spreadsheet. And then there's something kind of in the middle, it might be yellow, and then stuff that might be something we can put off for a few years, but isn't literally falling apart and needs immediate repair. And it's literally everything you could think around, like this is not, she'll go into more of the weeds, but it's like the roofs of the police department, or the HVAC system at City Hall, or when she mentioned fleet, that's the vehicles for which the city utilizes to do all the city services throughout the city. So step one is making that case. Step two is taking it to the city council, which you all have city councilors throughout the city who represent you, and they determine whether or not we put this on the ballot for the voters. And that would be something that would happen at town meeting, usually at town meeting day in March. And then voters get to decide, and there's a threshold that's slightly different for each, because one is related to property taxpayers paying back that bond, and the other is related to ratepayers. And then the final step, because actually there's 4 steps now that I'm saying them out loud. And the 4th step is actually, once we have the authorization from voters to go out on the bond, is that goes back to the council when we're ready to actually try to pull down the money, if you will. And they do another assessment in partnership with the mayor and administration to say, is it right? Is the timing right financially for the city to actually act upon the bond? So those are 4 critical steps to make sure we are being responsible, that we're stewarding the resources of taxpayers well, that we understand kind of how the economy might be changing and the city finances might be changing. So the step that we're at right now is back to that step 1 of making the case. And so next step will be going to voters and constituents, and then the council in January, to make sure folks understand that process. So bonds 101 with the mayor of Burlington. I'll do a podcast on it someday. So in terms of the core takeaways here around why now, just to sort of bring this to kind of a larger city need, the city has really deferred a lot of maintenance, both in our overall needs throughout the city, but also even within our water resources division. And that's for a lot of reasons. I'm very much a mayor who wants to look forward, find solutions, and act in a responsible way that makes sure that we are putting the real questions to the voters, because you deserve to know what the need is, but also making sure you know that we're committed to affordability as a city, and making sure that we're doing this with a deep review to make sure that we're only asking for what we critically need, and also offering you this information to know that if we keep deferring maintenance, much like your house, things will only get more expensive, and or things will break, and then the emergency repair is even more costly for us as a city. And so part of what we're trying to present to folks is a sustainable and affordable path forward here in this regard. We also just know that over the many years, sometimes different points in the history of the city, there's been more attention to the capital needs, for example, of our main plant that sits on the waterfront, and where what we've been investing in terms of all the technical inner workings of that particular plant. Other things change around us, right? State standards around water quality change for Lake Champlain. The need for us to densify our housing stock here in the city has changed in recent years, knowing that we need more places for people to live. We have a housing emergency. For us to build out that capacity, as Chapin was saying, we need to be able to have the infrastructure within the housing stock to support people being able to live, more people to live here in Burlington, as well as commercial growth, et cetera, that supports our grand list. We are really at capacity at this point and really need to be looking forward for building out what we need for housing and the growth and well-being of our community. And we'll need fire trucks and police cars and parks and working sidewalks that are safe to pass to also improve and continue to maintain the health and well-being of our neighborhoods as well. So With that, I'm wondering if you could each speak a little bit to that theme of affordability. I'll start with Chapin this time, because we've talked a lot about, both within the Burlington Electric Department, but also Water Resources has already been working a bit on how do we think about affordability within the water bills and the electric bills to make sure that we are thinking about ratepayers. Not everyone makes the same amount of money in Burlington. So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about what DPW has been up to and how we're incorporating that even more intentionally as we present these bonds for voters.
Great. We clearly want our community to be a vibrant and accessible place for the whole range of Burlington residents here. And as folks may recall, back in 2018, we had several plant failures at the main wastewater plant where we experienced unpermitted discharges where our equipment broke. And we had quickly responded by bringing forward a bond proposal then to fix the two pieces of the plant that broke. And at that time, we came to voters seeking support for a $30 million bond, which voters very strongly approved, which we were grateful for. As part of that effort, councilors at the time and the mayor were focused on affordability as well, and we put our first affordability program together. And that includes several things, such as the first tranche of water, we call it Life Water, should be cheaper than the subsequent use of water. So if you're conserving water at home and needing it for the basics use of life, that it should be affordable. We also had a component where we changed the structure of our rates and set up opportunities for low-income folks to register for discount programs. As part of this effort here, we have been in conversation with the council, with the administration, about a second turn of the wheel to make sure that we're going further on our affordability programs. And we were just this week talking to folks with a public works department in Seattle who has a really interesting affordability model that we're looking at to help renters. Because as folks know, most renters pay their own electrical bill, but they don't pay their own water bill. Mm-hmm. So how do we help renters who are low income, who do not pay the water bill directly? And there's an interesting model in Seattle that we're looking at in partnership with Burlington Electric. And I am pleased with the support of the council, with the support of the administration, that we will be able to take the next turn of the wheel so that if voters approve on this town meeting day the bonds for water and wastewater, there will be more opportunity for our low-income customers to take advantage of programs that will limit the impact to them.
Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate, first of all, being able to look across to other cities because I think there's a lot more we can learn than not by looking at cities and peer cities even closer to our size. But Seattle's a great model where they're continuing to innovate, to think around affordability and equitable measures for which we get a little bit deeper. So rather than a flat qualifier that might be just based on the federal poverty measure or something, how do we go a little bit deeper to acknowledge that ability to pay is a really important piece for us to maintain the economic diversity of Burlington, to think about all folks, so folks on limited and unfixed incomes, working families, folks really trying to make a go of it here in Burlington. I mean, we're all part of it, really. We're all in this together as we think about how to be really intentional with what we're putting forward to voters. So, Ashley, I wonder if you can speak a little bit to the GO bond. I'm just going to embrace the GO bond. This is going to be the moment. You heard it here. I'm going to rename it. It's all about branding. But the GO bond is an important piece around thinking about how it impacts property taxpayers. Because as I mentioned before in my Bond 101, taxpayers through the property tax side of the bill are the ones who are ultimately obligated to pay back a GO bond, unlike water ratepayers, which are the ones that are obligated to pay back a water-related bond. So can you speak a little bit to how it would impact taxes and this $20 million bond that we're talking about for the GO bond, maybe even a little context too of how many years would that cover? What are we thinking about in terms of what we could accomplish? Just a little bit more of a picture of how we would pay it back, how we would spend it.
Sure. Yeah. I actually have a few slides.
Love it. Great.
We could point to for this. So I think I'll start with your last question first, just that's the order of the day here. But, so the $20 million, as we stated before, is really important in us making sure that we have functioning infrastructure throughout the city. And one of the things that we've noticed over the last several years is due to deferred maintenance, we have increased costs and expenses related to just things not getting done when they needed to get done. So we have costly repairs, hoping that with implementation of this $20 million general obligation bond, go bond.
Thank you.
We can reduce actually the more critical, urgent needs that come up throughout a fiscal year. So it won't be a surprise. Right here, what I've shown is how we're projecting to currently spend out the $20 million. This is in addition to the annual borrowing amount that I mentioned before, the $2 million. So we're forecasting over the next 5 years about $8 to $10 million need for the general fund capital. And so having this general obligation for the next 3 years provides us that little bit of cushion to really hit that range of need. And in addition, one of the other things that we're battling constantly is inflation. Inflation has gotten better, but it's still present. And so while our needs have not decreased, they've continued to increase. We're also then battling those increases to both non-construction and construction-related expenses. Oh, here, I'm going to skip ahead. Sorry.
Okay.
We're going to go to this
one.
one.
Want to see that slide at some point.
Yes.
So we'll bring it back into the conversation.
We'll go back.
Yeah.
Oh, no, wait. We can go back.
Okay, great. Let's do it.
I forgot. We changed this up.
The excitement of the live TV. It's totally live TV, but it is low risk here at CCTV, which I so appreciate. Yeah. You don't have to show us again. You can show the graph. We were just making a joke. Yeah. All right.
All right, so my apologies. This is our slide on the debt capacity, which is it's a really neat graph that our office has put together, the CT office, showing where we're at. One of the things we have to pay attention to is what our obligations are, both as a city, but then also as a school district. And so what this is showing is with the recent high school bonding, where we're sitting within the ability for the city to bond for more money. We have actually, this past year, we found out that we have, made some great progress on reducing, making some large principal payments. We've also had some increase in the grand list that were unexpected. So this debt capacity has actually freed up a little bit. And so this has given us a little bit more flexibility this time around to consider a $20 million obligation bond. Mm-hmm. So we're making timely payments both on the principal side and interest side, and which is really helping us in the long run. And will also decrease the cost to taxpayers.
Let's go back to that slide just for a minute, because I want to make sure people, because this is probably one of the most helpful slides as we try to create the context, because everyone knows we're building a brand new high school, and that also hits the property tax bill, because that is a general obligation to property taxpayers from the school side of things, which is a separate governed body of our local democracy here. So if people really just kind of drill down here, you'll see in the more orange, the darker orange, that is the BHS bond, right? Yes. To rebuild. The light orange, I would say on the top was what exactly, Ashley? That is
it's more recent city bonding.
Yep. So on the city municipal side, and then prior bonding for the school is the blue, yep. And prior bonding for the city is in the green. So overall, that line up top is related to our debt limit, for which we have per policy to make sure that we are staying within our means. And people can start to see as we steps down almost like a sort of stairs, is our capacity starts to get the pressure, if you will. I mean, I always like to plain language it. The pressure is starting to come off. We are just in a unique opportunity moment where we have a lot of critical need, and the city decided very, I think, thoughtfully that we really need to make sure we have a safe and working high school. Right? We're all literally in this together to make sure our students and our staff have a safe place to be, and the city around it also has other infrastructure needs. But I wanted to give people this full view, and you could take it down now if you want in terms of the slide. because it can be hard if you only look at 1 year rather than multiple years. And that is something we're trying to also work on at the same time to give taxpayers and residents a more long-term view about where we're headed. So people can understand that we are
a pattern of not necessarily replacement, but just, our improvement expenditures will not be as critical. The costs will go down, and it'll be, I think, less costly for us to manage in the long run, more sustainable.
So Ashley, one last question for you on this, and then we're going to go back to Chapin. Can you give people a little bit of examples? Like what would $20 million start, like tangibly? What would look different? What would be worked upon? What would kind of like just an idea of some of the priorities? And you're joined by a capital committee, right? That's representatives from across city departments to help kind of make that scary spreadsheet. But what are some of those things on that spreadsheet and otherwise that would give an example of what this investment would actually look like in Burlington?
Yeah, I can give you a quick rundown through our major capital assets. So one of the things that is like high on my list at this point in time is our fleet, which general fund capital fleet is composed of both vehicles and equipment. And so we track that for all the departments. We, for the last couple of years, have put off the purchasing replacement of general fund capital fleet. So we have a pretty healthy list of vehicles and equipment that need to be replaced. And right now, that would be one of the bigger areas of the focus areas for this bond ask. I have a list of some fire trucks, ambulances. There's some snow plows and sidewalk tractors. That's like 45% of the need right now is related to public safety, public emergency response type fleet. So that is a big one, trying to get caught up on our replacement schedule. And I do feel that if we focus on that in this go around, we will get to a place where we'll be following a more cyclical, regular replacement schedule. And so that's probably the big one for me, so we can actually invest some dollars into our fleet. Next up, though, is our sidewalks and streets, which Chapin knows a lot about. Our sidewalks, we own about 133 miles. We have a goal of paving or replacing 3 miles of sidewalk every year. It's about $1 million a mile to replace, and right now we're at about 17 miles that need to be replaced. Streets, we own and maintain about 88 miles of streets. And the goal there is 4 miles a year, about $1.2 million a mile. And we have just under 11 miles that are on DPW's list that aren't meeting the appropriate condition threshold that they track every year. So there's a lot of investment that needs to happen, hopefully concurrently with some other sources of funding on that side, but those are two big major assets that we're tracking. We have bridge assets. Winooski Bridge is a major one for this bond. It is I'm tracking this one as both a bridge major infrastructure replacement project, but also a local match project, as it has, the city has been partnering with VTrans, and that project has received some significant grant funding to make happen. So we'll be getting and working with the Winooski. I can't forget the partnership with Winooski. So that project will help us get a better bridge, a new bridge, in addition to some bike ped components that will make it a safer place for all users. And then I think our central facilities, I cannot not mention our central facilities. We have some significant needs in many central facilities buildings. We own about 19 buildings. Out of the total, we have, I think it was $13 million of needs, about $700,000 a facility. City Hall, BCA, our fire and police stations. We have significant need across the board that these buildings are multi-purpose in most cases. We have the general public and we have employees who live and work in these buildings. And it's really important for us to make sure that they are they're safe and comfortable for all to enjoy, really, and be comfortable in. So, we've got parks, another $9 million thereabout, actually probably more, but again, it's about $700,000 a park and deferred needs. And transportation safety, I wanted to mention just that one as well. Those are the projects where DPW does a lot of traffic calming, some bike ped infrastructure implementation, intersection improvements, and we hope to at least get around $300,000 a year to tackle at least 14 new projects in that world to make things safer on our transportation infrastructure.
That's great. I'm impressed you can hold all of that in your mind, and also it's such an interesting job, right? You must drive around the city or walk or bike around the city and really see the city in such a unique way, both in probably a little bit of alarm about the increased need, but also the opportunity, because that's really when you talked about all these things, I heard, how do we actually start moving the needle a little more significantly in bike ped and traffic safety issues for folks getting mobile around our city in different ways that are not car dependent. Thinking about like sidewalks and how people can also get around our neighborhoods, and a lot of this overlaps with Department of Public Works in other ways. Of course, Chapin's here to talk about the water bond, but he also oversees how we do the sidewalks, how we do the streets, and they've been working to use an equity index model to really think about like, where do we start first and why? So where are people walking more rather than less around? Where are those 3 miles or so of sidewalks that we're trying to really invest in? And we all know that there's been an increase in cost and need for our emergency responders, and that puts wear and tear on the fleet, which I learned is not just vehicles and equipment. And so we have to be thoughtful about kind of the ongoing needs that we have, as well as the Winooski Bridge, which is a really important partnership we have with our neighboring city in Winooski. And local match, of course, means our local contribution to significant federal and state grants that we're able to qualify to take on the vast bulk of that big expense. And I'm glad to say that the City Council took a big step forward last night at a council meeting to move the Winooski Bridge part forward. So part of this bond is enabling us to be ready on some of these very core priorities for the city. So Chapin, I want to go over to you now and talk a little bit about what can we expect? What do these water bonds really mean for tangibly change in our wastewater, water, stormwater world?
Yeah. Our wastewater plants, some people may be surprised to hear this, but we did not have wastewater plants in the city of Burlington until 1953.
Really?
Yes.
That's a little alarming. Wow, okay.
So the city was founded 1865 with obviously people living here far before that. But up until 1953, wastewater was finding its way through channels, the ravines down to Lake Champlain and the river, Winooski River. Since then, about every 20 years, the wastewater plants have been upgraded. So in the mid-70s, there was an upgrade, and then in the early 90s was the last upgrade. And that really worked to handle a lot of the wet weather. We have a combined sewer system in most of Burlington, which means that the stormwater and the wastewater travel in the same pipe. And that is specifically around our downtown and our denser areas of the city. So in the early 90s, the main plant was designed to handle those wet weather flows better. And as a result, we reduced the volume and the frequency at which the incidence of combined sewer overflows occur, which is when a pipe carrying both stormwater and wastewater does not reach the plant due to the capacity in the pipes. So we have successfully worked to reduce the number of combined sewer overflows, but we are now entering the next generation where not only are we going to make a more resilient plant, one that does not have the failures that we had in 2018, but also a plant that takes our protection of our water bodies and our key assets to the next level. So phosphorus, as we know, is a pollutant that is causing negative outcomes in Lake Champlain. Cyanobacteria, the blue-green algae, as we experience, it closes beaches. We have been directed by state and federal regulators to reduce the amount of phosphorus that our plants discharge. And we are, as part of this lake bond, proposing to implement tertiary treatment. That is a third level of treatment of our wastewater to take phosphorus, additional phosphorus out of the wastewater. And that is a very key improvement. In addition, we look to be better managing odors and to be handling future growth for housing and other needs in the city. So the wastewater and stormwater bond in total ask is around $175 million. We know that's a very large ask, and we are looking at ways in which we can phase the work, in ways that we can enhance the affordability program so that we can minimize the impact to ratepayers.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that we're actually trying to really be thoughtful about our language, because the big bond, the 175 million or so, is really a lake bond, because it's around, also similar to what we were talking about with the GO bond. We want to advance some of our climate priorities. We want to advance clean water and our impact, our piece of it, if you will, for Lake Champlain's health and well-being, as well as our housing needs. We really have to think about this moment of strategic investment in our plant, so that not only that we're doing our part, but we're thinking about making sure we're not violating clean water standards that the state has put into place, and making sure that folks can actually utilize the lakeshore, right? When I think about our climate and we think about being able to adapt and making sure we're building a resilient city, we have to think about people being able to access water. And the free access to water gets really compromised when people can't go into the lake because of blooms, right? And I want to make sure that we are connecting all the dots and not just thinking of this as a wastewater plant. It is much bigger than that in terms of impact. And similarly with the drinking water side of it, right? And do you want to speak a little bit to the water reservoir and our needs there? You probably may not even realize where this reservoir might be.
That's right.
And the very cute historic building for which sits next to it.
That's right. And what the mayor was referring to is that Burlington stores millions of gallons of our drinking water up on top of the hill next to Main Street, across from Morrill Hall. Maybe folks would recognize the cute pump house building, the historic building that sits at the corner of Main Street near University Place. And it is key infrastructure that serves the high service in our community, which is the higher elevation of Burlington relies on not only the reservoir, but the elevated storage tanks. We have 2 water tanks and 2 reservoirs. Those are critical in serving not only the university, but the state's only level 1 trauma center. So UVMMC, University of Vermont Medical Center, relies on the tanks and the reservoir to have dependable water service there. So the $21 million water bond will focus in large part on upgrades to the reservoir, providing a new roof, handling some of the upgrades to the pipes inside, and also a key improvement, which is to the pump house building itself, which directly feeds the hospital and the university and other customers on the Hill. So in addition to that, there's dozens of it's actually over 100 miles of pipes underneath our city that provide the potable water from our plant to all of our customers across the city. People may not know, but about a quarter of our pipes are over 100 years old. Those pipes are at risk of failure. When they break, there's outages, people lose their water service, it becomes a large inconvenience, roads can be closed, etc. So through this bond proposal, we would also be looking to continue our investment in relining and replacing our pipes across the city, often in coordination with transportation programs like paving, so that we're not paving a street and then digging it up 2 or 3 years later to replace the water main.
And I think back to just really zooming out and understanding kind of, that wasn't a cue to the camera, but anyway, you zoomed out anyway. So when we think about when you might in your neighborhood or you might be driving by, especially in the wintertime when you're thinking about frozen ground and when we have a water main break, that is costly for the city. That's not as if we just have extra funds sitting around. So we pay for it one way or the other. And so trying to really think about being able to kind of build up our capacity to be proactive and to make sure that we're heading off at the pass a bigger, more expensive fix. It's much like if you haven't fixed your hot water heater and it suddenly fails you and it starts to leak all over your basement. That's going to be a much more costly fix than being able to kind of have more proactive repairs along the way. And so I think, I have great confidence in, again, the preparation in this step one of where we've been able to get the GO bond and the water-related bonds ready for consideration by constituents and the council. This is the beginning of the conversation. We have been diligently trying to get these pieces of information about the why, our plans for fiscal responsibility of making sure this is affordable for both ratepayers on the water side and property taxpayers on the GO bond side, and making sure you have a chance to kind of learn about it in more detail. So I want to plug a few different dates as we wrap up here. So January 6th, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, is a town hall for the entire city. We'll have a virtual component to it, so you can zoom in if you'd like to watch. It will be recorded by our friends here at CCTV, and you can come live at Contois Auditorium at City Hall to talk more about these items. We'll give a full picture of money-related items, this and what also might be happening for our fiscal year 26 operating budget on January 6th at City Hall. I also want to just mention that same week, because we are overachievers here at the Mulvaney-Stanek administration, that we have our third or fourth, I couldn't figure this out before, third, thank you, like the peanut gallery always helps me have all the details and numbers, our third community safety forum, which is a commitment I've made as mayor to have this critical conversation of how we continue to make our communities safe, feel safe, be safe for folks, and all the many complexities, these topics that relate to whether our community is safe or not. That will be on January 9th at 5:30, also at Contois at City Hall. And we'll be focusing on substance use, all the intricacies of why folks are openly using drugs, what are we doing about it, how are we coordinating on a regional and statewide level, what's up with this overdose prevention center concept that Burlington was enabled to start advancing per state law changes earlier this year. Again, that's January 9th. January 13th at the City Council meeting, which will be the first one in January, we will be giving a very comprehensive overview of the fiscal year 26 operating budget for the general fund. That will be the first time we'll get into the real details. I really appreciate all of my city staff, but department heads in particular, and all of their colleagues who've been preparing our budget much earlier in the process than before. So we can really give you a really knowledgeable reason and tangible reasons of why we are planning our budget as is, and we will get really clear about our core services, the core needs for which the city needs to be advancing, and a clear why to you around how we plan to keep that sustainable and affordable for folks, because we know property taxes pay for the operations of city functions. Finally, and this might seem like a little bit of a right-hand turn, but as we wind down the calendar year of 2024, we're winding up and ready for our great city event called Highlight. It's our New Year's Eve celebration as the City of Burlington, and I want to invite you all downtown. It will be a fun and vibrant time to build community, to ring out 2024 and to welcome 2025 and all the good and vibrant things ahead of us as a city. You can get your New Year's Eve buttons by going online at highlight.community. And you can also even go downtown to BCA and buy buttons online, or in person, I should say, or online. So hope to see you out in the community on New Year's Eve. And I'm still working on a catchy close to my show, but I want to just really, again, appreciate Chapin and Ashley for coming on to this show, episode number 2, to talk about some pretty wonky but very important investments and bonds that are helping us to kind of really direct where the city is going. How do we, again, bring up the vibrancy of our communities and all the neighborhoods throughout the city. So thank you very much for being on.
It's been a pleasure.
All right. Easy peasy, right? Excellent. Well, thanks for watching, everyone, and we'll see you next time on The Mayor's Show.